Thursday evening, April 2024. I was at home, shoes off, watching the Hornets lose, that's just a regular Thursday, and my CPA called me. Casual voice. Almost too casual, like he was trying to sound relaxed. He said he'd noticed some irregular login activity on the QuickBooks Cloud account and wanted to know if I'd been poking around in the books. I thought I was going to throw up, because for 6 weeks, I'd been secretly building a fraud case against this man. He'd stolen over $400,000 from my company through shell companies, registered in his own name. I had a forensic accountant with a 62-page report documenting everything. And now he was on the phone, asking me why I was looking at the books. I made up something about a vendor invoice, a double-billed compressor. He seemed to buy it. I hung up, walked out to my truck, sat in the driveway for 20 minutes trying to get my hands to stop shaking. The next morning, my forensic accountant called in a panic. Someone had gone into QuickBooks overnight and started deleting records. My CPA was destroying evidence. What he didn't know is that QuickBooks keeps a complete audit log of every single change, timestamps, credentials, everything. He spent 2.5 hours that night trying to destroy evidence that was already backed up. Every deletion was logged under his own login. He didn't cover his tracks. He built the prosecution's case for them. But let me start from the beginning, because this story isn't just about one business. It's about 5. Quick thing before we dive in: if this one hooks you, smash that like button and subscribe. New stories every day. I'm going to keep names and some details changed, because there's an active criminal case. But the structure of what happened is real. And I'm telling it because of a landscaper named Miguel, who spent a year believing he was destroying the business his father built, when the truth was someone else was taking it apart from the inside. I'm 43. I own a mid-size HVAC company in the Charlotte area, 22 employees, commercial installs, residential maintenance contracts, the whole deal. I built it from a single van and a toolbox in 2014. And by 2023, we were doing about $1.8 million a year in revenue. Not getting rich, but comfortable. I earned that comfort by being gone, 60, 70 hours a week. Job sites at 6 in the morning. Bids and proposals until midnight. Our CPA, I'll call him Todd, had been handling my business and personal taxes since 2019. A buddy referred him at a cookout. Told me Todd had saved him like $8,000 on his returns the year before, and that was enough for me. Todd was sharp, responsive, never missed a deadline. I gave him access to my business accounts, my QuickBooks, everything. That's standard when you have a CPA managing your books. It's also the single thing that made everything else possible. How hands-off was I? I hadn't personally reviewed a bank statement in over a year. Not one. I hadn't questioned a single expense report. I was so focused on landing contracts and running job sites that I completely handed off the financial side of my own company. I told myself that's what you do when you grow. You delegate. You trust your people. What I actually did was hand someone unsupervised access to everything and stop paying any attention to what they were doing with it, which, looking back, is embarrassing to say out loud. February 2024. My operations manager had quit 2 weeks earlier. Personal reasons, left on good terms, but it meant I was temporarily handling the admin work myself. Bills, invoicing, reconciliation. For the first time in probably 14 months, I was actually sitting down with the company bank statements. I wasn't looking for fraud. I was trying to reconcile a parts order from our carrier distributor. I think it was a batch of TXV valves, something routine, but 3 vendor names jumped out at me. Pinnacle Service Solutions, Ridgeline Contractors Group, Clear Path Mechanical. I've been in HVAC for 20 years. I know every supplier, every subcontractor, every parts distributor we work with. Never heard of any of these. Not once. I searched them in the transaction history. 27 wire transfers to Pinnacle. $118,433.76. 31 to Ridgeline. $147, 211, 04, 36 to clear path. $146, 382, 18, 94 transactions over 23 months. Individual amounts between $1, 200 and $8, 750. Small enough to blend into the noise of a business that moves a couple million a year through its accounts, especially when nobody's watching. $412, 026, 98. Gone. I pulled up the North Carolina Secretary of State website, searched all three company names. All three were registered LLCs, formed within weeks of each other in early 2022. The registered agent on every single one was Todd. I closed my laptop. I remember I just sat there staring at the wall above my monitor for a while. Then I drove to a Panera, the one on South Boulevard near the Auto Zone. Sat there for 3 hours, ordered a large dark roast, and didn't drink a single sip. It just got cold in front of me. $412,000, funneled out of my company in amounts just small enough that I'd never notice, because I'd made it perfectly clear to everyone, including apparently the person robbing me, that I was not going to look. Now I need to tell you about what happened to my company during the months this was all unraveling, because this is where these stories usually cut ahead to the lawyer and the courtroom and the satisfying ending. They skip the part with actual faces on it. I called a lawyer that afternoon, not my regular lawyer, a friend who handles white-collar cases. He listened to everything and told me not to confront anyone, not to make any moves until I had a forensic accountant documenting everything. I hired one named Patricia. That engagement cost $14,500 and took 6 weeks. Those things were necessary, but while they were happening, I was also supposed to be running a company with 22 people depending on me for their paychecks. And I failed at that. Badly. Between March and August 2024, while I was building a fraud case, I was so consumed by the investigation that I lost 2 commercial contracts worth about $90,000 in combined revenue. One was a restaurant chain, a Tex-Mex place, 4 locations, that needed 23 rooftop units replaced. I'd been working that bid for 5 months. I missed the follow-up meeting because I was reviewing wire transfer records at Patricia's office. The project manager called me twice. I didn't call back. I kept telling myself I'd get to it tomorrow, and then tomorrow I was back in Patricia's conference room looking at spreadsheets. They went with another contractor. The other was a property management company I'd been trying to land for 2 years. They finally reached out, and I was too buried in discovery documents to respond in time. In July, cash flow got tight enough that I had to make a decision I still think about every single day. I called 2 of my technicians into my office on a Tuesday morning. I think it was a Tuesday. Yeah, it was, because we just done our Monday route sheet the day before, and I'd sat there looking at their names on it knowing what was coming. Marcus had been with me for 3 years. He was good, reliable, had a 4-year-old daughter, and a mortgage he'd signed 6 months earlier. Darnell had just relocated from Greensboro specifically to take this job. His wife had quit her position to move with him. I sat them both down and told them I couldn't keep them on. I couldn't tell them why, because the investigation was still active. They probably walked out of there thinking I was just another small business owner who couldn't manage his money. 2 people stole over $400,000 from my company, and Marcus and Darnell paid for it with their jobs. There's no framing that makes that acceptable. Marcus had a 4-year-old and a new mortgage. Darnell had uprooted his whole life for this position. They didn't do anything wrong. They just worked for the wrong company at the wrong time. When people ask me later in this story whether I feel like I won, that's where my mind goes. Not the courtroom. Marcus's face when I told him. The way he nodded and didn't say anything and walked out to the parking lot. He didn't slam the door or curse me out or anything. Just nodded. That was worse. I later learned he got a position with a competitor about 6 weeks after I let him go. Darnell moved back to Greensboro. I don't know what happened after that. I hope he's doing okay. I genuinely don't know. Now, what the forensic investigation actually found. Patricia pulled 2 years of bank records, QuickBooks data, wire transfer documentation, and built a timeline of every transaction through those 3 shell companies. She also found that the funds from the shells were funneled into 2 accounts. One was Todd's personal checking. The other was a joint account in Todd's name and my wife's name. I'll call her Megan. She'd had signatory authority on the business checking account and had been helping code the fraudulent transfers in QuickBooks so they'd look like legitimate vendor payments. I'm going to tell you this part once and move on, because if this were just a story about a cheating wife and a crooked accountant, you've heard it 100 times. The joint account meant the fraud investigation became a divorce. The marriage is not what this story is about. What this story is about is what Patricia found when she started looking at the broader patterns. She flagged structures in Todd's work that didn't match my business at all. Shell companies with eerily similar naming conventions, similar transfer amounts, similar timing cadences. She asked me a question that reframed everything. Did I have any connection to a landscaping company, an auto body shop, or a dental practice in the Charlotte metro area? I didn't. I just stared at her. The wire transfer patterns draining my accounts had structural twins. Same playbook. Same approach to staying under reporting thresholds. Same style of naming. Todd wasn't running a fraud. He was running a franchise. My attorney reached out to the landscaping company first. The owner's name was Miguel. When my lawyer explained why he was calling, there was a long pause. Then Miguel said 4 words. I knew something was wrong. Miguel's father started the landscaping company in 1994, built it from nothing, mowed lawns himself for the first 5 years until he could afford to hire a crew. 30 years of work, one client at a time. Miguel took over in 2018 when his father retired. The company was doing solid business, steady clients, a full crew of 12 commercial contracts with 3 HOAs and a property management group. Miguel was proud. His father was proud. The plan was that Miguel would run it for another 20 years and maybe pass it to his own kids, the way it had been passed to him. That was the whole point. That was why his father had spent 3 decades building it. Todd became Miguel's accountant in 2020. By mid-2022, cash flow started tightening. Miguel couldn't figure out why. Revenue was steady, sometimes even up from the year before. But the money just wasn't there at the end of the month. He assumed it was rising costs. Materials, insurance, fuel. Everybody in the trades was dealing with that. He tightened the budget. When that didn't help, he cut his own salary. When that still didn't help, he cut it again. He started working Saturdays to take on extra jobs personally, doing installations himself alongside his crew to try to make up the difference. His wife told him he looked exhausted. He told her he was fine. By November 2023, Miguel had taken out a personal loan to cover operating expenses. He and his wife were fighting about money constantly. She wanted him to consider selling. He couldn't bring himself to do it. It was his father's company, but he was starting to think she was right. He told me he'd lie awake at 3 in the morning running the numbers in his head, going over every line, every expense, trying to figure out where the money was going. It never added up. He'd pull up spreadsheets on his phone in bed, his wife asleep next to him, scrolling through transaction after transaction, looking for the mistake he was sure he was making. He started seeing a therapist because he genuinely believed he was losing his mind. The numbers should have worked. They didn't. And the only explanation he could come up with was that he was the problem, that his father had been better at this than he was, that he was the generation that lost the family business. He told me he almost called his father in January 2024 to tell him he was shutting it down. He had the phone in his hand. He couldn't make himself dial. He said he kept imagining his father's voice on the other end, and he just couldn't do it. He put the phone down and went back to staring at the books. He was 2 months from closing when my lawyer called him. Todd had stolen just over $200,000 from Miguel's company over roughly the same time frame. Different shell company names, but identical structure. Same transfer amounts. Same timing. A carbon copy of what he'd done to me. Running simultaneously on a completely different business in a completely different industry. Miguel never had a reason to suspect his accountant because the same thing was true for him that was true for me. He was too busy running the business to audit the person managing the books. And Todd knew that. Todd was counting on it. That was the whole design. Miguel and I met for coffee at a Starbucks off Independence Boulevard. Neither of us said much at first. There's not a lot of small talk you can make with someone who's been robbed by the same person. We just kind of sat there with our coffees for a minute. But when he told me about lying awake at night, convinced he was destroying what his father built, I understood something about Todd's scheme that the dollar amounts don't capture. The money is devastating. $400,000 from me, $200,000 from Miguel, whatever he took from the others. But the real weapon was something else. It was making his victims doubt themselves, making competent, hard-working people believe they were failures, making a man think he was losing his father's legacy through his own incompetence, when the whole time someone was quietly dismantling it from the inside. That's a specific kind of cruelty that doesn't show up on a balance sheet. You can quantify stolen money. You can file charges over stolen money. You can't put a number on what it does to a person to spend a year believing they are the reason everything is falling apart. Miguel asked me how I found out. I told him the truth. My operations manager quit, and for the first time in over a year, I actually looked at my own bank statements. That's it. That's the whole thing. One employee quit, and the guy who never checks the books happened to check the books. If my ops manager had stayed another 6 months, Todd might still be running the scheme right now. On all of us. The auto body shop owner's attorney contacted mine after the DA's office started making inquiries. From what I've been told, the pattern was identical. Same structure, different shell names, different dollar amounts, same playbook. The dentist situation I know less about, but the DA is investigating. There may be a 5th business that hasn't been confirmed yet. 5 businesses that we know of. Maybe more. 1 accountant. The same scheme, copied and pasted like a template. Todd had essentially built a fraud assembly line for small businesses. And that brings us to the moment I told you about at the start, Todd's phone call. Week 6 of the investigation. That Thursday evening in April 2024, when he called asking if I'd been poking around in the books. You know how that went. I made up a story about a vendor invoice. Sat in my truck, shaking for 20 minutes afterward. I'm a guy who fixes air conditioners for a living. I am not built for this. I apparently was not convincing enough. The next morning, Patricia called me. I remember I was brushing my teeth, and she was panicking. Someone had gone into QuickBooks overnight and started modifying transaction records. Vendor names were being changed, payment descriptions altered, entries deleted outright. Todd was covering his tracks. For about 2 hours, I thought it was over. I thought he'd wiped everything and we'd have nothing. Here's what I didn't tell you at the start. Modifying and deleting records in QuickBooks doesn't actually erase them. The system maintains a complete audit log that captures every single change, every deletion, with timestamps and the login credentials of whoever made them. Every record Todd thought he was destroying was being quietly preserved in a log he either didn't know about or didn't think anyone would ever pull. And Patricia had already made forensic copies of the complete database 3 weeks earlier anyway. Every original record was sitting on an external drive in her office safe. So not only did we still have all the original evidence, we now had a documented record of Todd logging in at 1:47 a.m. and systematically attempting to destroy it. 847 modifications and deletions between 1:47 and 4:12 a.m., all under his credentials. My attorney said that single night of panic deletions probably did more to guarantee a conviction then 6 weeks of forensic accounting. When someone wakes up in the middle of the night and spends 2.5 hours trying to destroy financial records, that tells a jury everything about what they knew and when they knew it. Todd didn't just fail to cover his tracks. He created an entirely new category of evidence against himself. The villain didn't get caught by a hero. He got caught by his own panic and a software feature he didn't bother to Google. I barely slept for the next 2 weeks. Every time my phone buzzed, I thought it was my lawyer telling me something had fallen apart. I started parking in different spots at work and taking weird routes home because I was paranoid about, I don't even know what, being followed. Like I said, HVAC guy, not a spy, but I couldn't hand this off to anyone. I had to hold it together until we were ready to move. 2 weeks later, we did. My attorney filed for divorce and simultaneously sent a formal complaint to the North Carolina State Board of CPA Examiners with Patricia's complete 62-page forensic report. Every wire transfer, every Shell LLC, every bank statement, and every record Todd had altered and deleted with timestamps proving his attempted cover-up. A criminal referral went to the Mecklenburg County DA's office. The findings about the matching patterns across other businesses were included, which meant the DA wasn't just looking at an embezzlement case. They were looking at a multi-victim fraud operation spanning several years and multiple small businesses. Things moved fast after that. Todd's CPA license was suspended within 11 days. By September, after a full hearing, it was permanently revoked. He will never practice accounting in North Carolina again. And because the board shares findings with other states, his career is effectively over everywhere. His arrest came August 19th, 14 counts of felony embezzlement and 6 counts of wire fraud. And those are just the charges related to my business. The DA is actively pursuing additional charges connected to Miguel's company and the others Patricia flagged. Todd posted bail at $175,000. His own wife filed for divorce 2 days after his arrest. My divorce was finalized November 14th, 2024. Megan received no share of the business, no alimony, and was ordered to pay restitution of $206,013, her documented share of the stolen funds. I got primary, legal, and physical custody. She gets supervised visitation every other weekend. The $206,013. I'll probably never see most of it. She's working retail in Kannapolis, living with her mother. The court can garnish her wages, but at her income level, I'll be collecting small checks for the next 20 years. The money's gone. I try not to think about it because when I do, I just get angry, and that doesn't help anything. I spent $14,500 on the forensic accountant and $47,000 in legal fees. I lost $90,000 in contracts and 2 good employees who didn't deserve what happened to them. I lost 15 pounds during the worst of it. Wasn't eating, wasn't sleeping, just running on coffee and anger for months. My 7-year-old is in therapy now. He has nightmares about people leaving. He asked me last month why Mom doesn't live with us anymore, and I told him the truth in a way I hoped a 7-year-old could carry. That Mom made some bad choices, and adults have to face consequences just like kids do, and that none of it was his fault. He seemed to accept that. I don't know if he actually did. My daughter's 4. She calls out for her mom at bedtime, and I'm the one who sits with her until she falls asleep. Some nights that takes a long time. I'm in therapy too. I probably should have started earlier. My business survived. Revenue was actually up 11% last quarter, but I'm working 80-hour weeks again. My therapist has pointed out that this is exactly the pattern that created the vulnerability in the first place. She's right, and I know she's right, and I'm still doing it because I don't know how to stop yet. Old habits. I'm trying to hire an operations manager so I can step back. I hired a real accounting firm this time, one with actual internal oversight procedures, segregation of duties, and quarterly reviews where I sit in the room and go through every line item myself. Every single one. I will never give one person that kind of unsupervised access to my finances again. Miguel is still in business. He hired his own forensic accountant and is cooperating with the DA's office. He told me last month that his father called him after learning what had really been happening and said, "I always knew you weren't the problem." Miguel said that was the first time in over a year he felt like he could breathe. I'm not going to lie. When he told me that I had to look away for a second, the auto body shop owner has lawyered up. I don't know about the dentist yet. I keep coming back to one thing. Not my situation specifically. I keep thinking about how many small businesses are running right now with the exact same setup mine had. One person handling the money, an owner too busy to check. The same structural blind spot Todd exploited, existing in thousands of companies that will never know they are vulnerable until someone tests it. Todd didn't need to be a genius to pull this off. He didn't need sophisticated tools or insider connections. He needed one thing: clients who weren't looking. That's all. That's the whole trick. Every business he targeted, the only thing that made the fraud possible was an owner who trusted the numbers without reading them. Including me. Including Miguel. Including, probably, people none of us will ever meet. Todd's trial starts June 9th. If there's interest, I'll post what happens.